Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak on something which has always been, like John said, very, very close to not just my heart but to my profession. I actually changed a job from the Indian Express to the Telegraph just because the Telegraph agreed to let me go and cover the war in Beirut. And as you have said already, that it was at that time when we didn't have relations with Israel in the 80s. It was another world. Now when I look back, it seems like another world, where India was pursuing a very independent foreign policy, where India was standing up for all the struggles of the world, because she had emerged from a major struggle of partition, and it had a foreign policy that was based on rights, on justice, on equality of all people and the sovereignty of the peoples of the world. So we had obviously no relations with Israel. And it was extremely dangerous for an Indian reporter to go through in the middle of the war, because the Israelis had managed to capture some of the road between Damascus and Beirut. So I was smuggled through by the Palestinians at the bottom of their car, left at the Bekaa Valley, which was under attack at that time, where we were living under the orchards, until they could arrange a car or a person who could drive me through the checkpoints. That's a long story, but it was a story which really brought me up and taught me two things. One, the amazing grit and courage of the people of Palestine, of the Palestinians, which has to be seen to be believed, of the kind of fight, the kind of enthusiasm, the kind of passion, is something maybe people during our freedom struggle saw, but we have not seen. We've only seen the diversity of that in communal violence and killings and massacres. And the second thing that taught me as a journalist was that all that the big media writes is wrong. The big media at that time, we didn't have television. So the big media at that time was Associated Press, American, Reuters, British, AFP, French, and they controlled the news agencies. They were the news agencies that controlled the media of the world. And the picture that they had painted of that war in Beirut was completely 360 degrees different from the reality that we saw on the ground. To put it very mildly, their projection was that the Palestinians were the aggressors, and the reality was that the Israelis had even defied ceasefire to continue the shelling of the Palestinians and the civilians living in Beirut from the sea and from the land, while it was supposed to be a ceasefire. They had cut off, snapped off all the power links of the people of Beirut. They had snapped off all the drinking water. They were trying to drill holes in the road to get some water to survive. There were families living in tall buildings, old people, ailing people, no medical supplies. It was a completely placing people under the siege. Nobody ever reported that. And in these 30-odd years, nobody has reported the truth about the Palestinian struggle. This morning itself, Fox News says that Hamas cancels its classes in Gaza to send the children to riot against Israel. That's Fox News, based on some Israeli Defense Forces release. I mean, without even going there, one knows that that was probably the biggest lie that was spun out today. And spun really to justify the kind of massacre that's going on in Gaza over and over and over again. 2006, we thought was the worst it could get. 2009, it became even worse. 2012, 2014, 2018, and now it's already started in 2019. We are not even halfway through the year. I mean, John has just pointed out how women and children are being targeted. And the photographs that are coming out of Gaza not in the big media, except once, when it crossed even the boundaries that international media could accept, but have been of the utmost suffering of people losing their little babies, their little children, their aged parents. This time, what was the false say of somebody who I read about, a 14-month-old Seba? She was killed with her aunt, where? In her own home through Israeli missiles. There were little babies who were killed in their homes along with their entire families. There have been cases where full families have been wiped out by the Israelis, which is leading scholars like a good friend of ours, Haider Eid, who is based in Gaza, to call it the Gaza concentration camp. It is an outdoor concentration camp. You have the Egyptians blocking it from the one side. You have the Israelis on the other side who can come in at will and who can kill at will and who do kill at will. And you have Palestinians, the political entity of the Palestinians divided, and you have the West Asian Arab countries completely divided, and you have a Saudi Arabia which is basically leading the war against the Palestinians today and making friends with the Israelis. And the war on Yemen is an indication of that. You have, I mean, look at the kind of killings that happened just now in the Grand March. You had 27 Palestinian, including children, killed. You had 700 properties completely finished. You had thousands of people injured without medical supplies to treat them. And we are calling this humanity? And we are not being able to join the Palestinians in resisting this? The Palestinians knew about this as far back as we went. In the Bekaa Valley, they took me, I remember, to what were these storage houses, where the Arab countries, the big Arab countries, had sent them supplies of supposed food and clothes. They just took me to a random one, they opened it, and what was there? They were torn clothes, the kind that you wouldn't give to even beggars. There were tins, and they just pulled out a tin and they opened it, expired, crawling with maggots. This is what the Arabs did to the Palestinians, the only secular Arabs, the educated Arabs, the people who stood up for the Arab cause, as it were, which is the Palestinian cause. This is the kind of stuff they sent 35 years ago, while they said that we are supporting you. Today they don't even say that we are supporting you. The few countries who have taken a position, I mean, for me the conspiracy is much greater. It's not just the Israelis, it's not just the Americans walking into Iraq. It is to trample down on the resistance in West Asia one by one. And what is the resistance? Anybody who supports the Palestinian cause is enemy number one of Israel, and then becomes enemy number one of the US and the Western powers. So you had Saddam Hussein taken out. You had you had Syria involved in a huge war and attack. And Syria is one of the very few countries that has been standing up for the Palestinians. You have Yemen under attack. Qatar is the new enemy today because it's taking positions on the Palestinian count. And you have Iran also under attack. And now the latest news today is that Trump is planning an Iraq-like invasion on Iran. So this is, and until we realize that Palestinian issue is one, I mean, when we went, it was never a Muslim issue. And it hurts me when I attend only meetings here which are hosted by Muslim organizations or attended by Muslims largely. It was an issue of struggle. It's an issue of rights. It's an issue of injustice, of the gravest kind of injustice done to people in the world. And we have systematically, the governments of the world, pushed it to a corner, pushed the Palestinians to a corner, and reduced a struggle of rights to a Muslim issue. To knowing that by doing so they are going to be able to isolate the Palestinians more and more in the world, or at least try to. Of course, they haven't been able to quell the resistance. They have not been able to destroy the secularism. They have not been able to turn Palestinians into terrorists. And the new weapon that the Palestinians have adopted, a very strong, potent weapon, is BDS, boycott, divestment, sanctions. One of the most potent weapons, peaceful, ran through many universities, even the US, in the US, where students' unions adopted BDS, where they have succeeded in marginalizing big companies or bringing them to their knees, where they even had Starbucks issuing clarifications that no, we are not anti-Palestinian, and where they are been able to exert pressure at least on fence-sitters to take a position. So this is the fight back. It hurts these Western countries if you hit their multinationals, if you hit the corporate sector, and you're able to persuade people to boycott their goods, to impose a people's sanctions on these kind of bodies. It's a small movement at one level, it's a huge movement at another level. It's a sustained movement, it's a movement that is continuing. They've attacked friends of ours who actually started the movement living in Ramallah. They have tried to finish their voices and shut them down. But for everybody who is shut down, there are many more who are rising. But even so, this is all good talk. The point is that it is a difficult and an extremely difficult struggle time for the Palestinians. I'm very sad, and it's very unfortunate that more mainstream organizations in India and the Ministry of External Affairs and the government of India has joined the big countries, the so-called civilized world, which is actually the most uncivilized world today, in the kind of wars that they are waging against the people of the world, in sidelining the Palestinian cause and ignoring it. And today our new friend is, of course, Israel. Israel is actually dominating our politics, our interests, our arms industry. There was a little movement among some of us that you should take a position against the arms being supplied by the Israelis, because every dollar that you pay to Israel is used in the arms industry against the Palestinians. But we have so many fights to wage. This is yet another fight. And perhaps after this terrible right-wing turn of violence, led also not just by the Western NATO powers, but also by some of the major, so-called major countries in West Asia, perhaps there will be a change. I think Saudi Arabia will have to realize, or that fellow called MBS, that at one time when they've come for everybody, they're going to come for him. And it'll be too late. Thank you so much.